I finished the last section looking at this idea of us reflecting on what research-informed teaching we have experienced or delivered. The key thing of this exercise was to externalise and recognise this within our teaching, and also to see where we've thoroughly enjoyed it or where we found it frustrating. What I want to go on and do, though, is begin to evaluate exactly what that might mean in terms of developing your session. So the first thing is this notion of research-informed course design. So we're designing courses based upon the research in our area. I've already highlighted the issue between what you could call cutting-edge research, and everybody knows that to be research. But when does research become the ordinary knowledge? So if there's a new intervention, a new way of doing CPR, we recognise that as being research, and we can say, we're doing a research-informed curricula here and course design. But if we're using the traditional methods of CPR, do we consider that to be research? Now, this is an existential question that I don't want to get into here, but it's just one of the reasons why some of the time we might not see our work as research informed, because certain bodies of knowledge transgress that notion of research and just become the known canon of information. So what does this mean in summary? Well, when we're designing our courses, we're taking in consideration the research that underpins that knowledge. We then also have the perspective of research active staff. Now, I want to include in this, as I have throughout this session, professionally active staff. I think what we're talking about here is giving students access to the profession, the discipline, and in some cases that is traditional academic research. In others, it's access to the professional language, the professional behaviours and ways of working. So this is equally appropriate to development of research-informed teaching. Then we have pedagogical research and innovation. Doing this course, hopefully you've experienced a whole host of ways in which we can inform our practice by good pedagogical skills. Remember, that's research-informed teaching. You are at least, you're probably more than this, but at least two professionals. You're your discipline professional and you're a pedagogical professional. So you may be a nurse, but also a pedagogical lecturer. You may be a lawyer, a solicitor, a barrister, but you are also an academic researcher. And that as pedagogical practice means that you have these twin identities, at least two, I'm sure you have more. And then finally, we have research skills as employability and enhancement. This is where we take the notion of being a researcher and the features of that and say these are skills that are needed in the workplace. So while I'm sure some of our graduates go on to be research assistants, doctoral students and others, many of them won't, but they all will require the ability to understand information, to understand the development of a good question and good research. So hopefully this is another way that you can hang your hat, your pedagogical hat, on ways of including research-informed teaching in your work and or recognise research-informed teaching within your work. But what else can research-informed teaching provide? I think one of the most important things it can provide is a sharing of enthusiasm. I know from talking to you and former cohorts and my colleagues, the one area where you're all most impressive is when you are talking about your passions, and your passions tend to be your research and your professional practice. So I've had conversations on all types of topics, and to be honest, a lot of the time I haven't understood the detail, but I have been totally taken by the way in which you, my colleagues, engage with these areas, and so are the students. And I think we need to remember that we can use our research, our professional engagement as this motivational tool that sits within our teaching delivery. Insights into the knowledge of production. Remember that research-informed teaching shouldn't just be framed as creating researchers. it's creating critical thinkers who understand how knowledge is produced and hopefully can question fake news, can question alternative facts, not from a political or personal perspective, but from good research. And that research sits in research-informed teaching. Those students becoming part of the production. One of the things we want to do with students is get them to move from being the recipients of information that we project to the co-creators of knowledge. Now, many of them won't get there. Many of them won't actually be creating high quality information, but some of them will, and I think we should get them to aspire to be part of that and at least change their relationship with information from something that they simply receive to something which they are part of producing and developing. And finally, research-informed teaching allows us to show the true power of research, that it does change things, that universities are not ivory towers, but rather are ways in which we shape our society, hopefully, if not definitely, for the better. You know, I started out this with that statement from one of my colleagues right at the first time I delivered this, when they looked to research-informed teaching and framed it as another damn thing to think about. And I had real sympathy for that. This notion of they've not only got to be thinking about 1, 2, 3, learning contracts, this, that and the other, but also research-informed teaching. On reflection, I realised that in many ways it's a false categorisation. It's not that you have to do research-informed teaching and you'll do it in the 3rd week of the course, but rather that our teaching is research-informed. And so this is not a process of something that you add on to the top of it, but rather something you take into consideration as you design your teaching. So you could have something, and this would sound bizarre, as learning outcome informed teaching. Now, of course, you'd want to take those learning outcomes and use them to design the teaching session to ensure that the teaching session meets those learning outcomes and makes sense in light of those. But you would never talk about learning outcome informed teaching. Why not? Because learning outcomes are an essential element of all teaching. And what I've learned through reflecting on this, research-informed teaching is equally an essential element in what we do, and potentially separating it out as, oh, this separate thing, totally misplays what it is. And what I'm wanting you to consider is not doing it as an exercise every now and again, but recognizing it in what you do and designing it in just as you would learning outcome or any other element of your curricular design. So I can't say I can take away the responsibility and sort of make it easier, but I can advocate not creating a separate body of work, which is research-informed teaching, but rather ensuring that we think of research as we design our teaching. The final quick question would have been to go back to, do you do research-informed teaching? The questionnaire is live on the PowerPoint slides, so you can click and then engage with it there. But in essence, what we tend to see is the cohort moves from, I think this last cohort was about 80% who definitely used research-informed teaching and 20% who are questionable, to by the end of the session, 100% recognised that research-informed teaching was part of what they did. And not only that, more people recognised that they used more differing types of research-informed teaching. So excuse me. So it was a way in which we recognised that this idea of we already do research-informed teaching, we just need to recognise that's what we do. Excuse me. The final thing I wanted to consider is actually designing research-informed teaching. And this is something we can do as part of the Zoom room. If you're not able to take part in that, that was really about us as a group working together on a research paper, on a particular module, and seeing if we can design good research-informed teaching. So, what did we try to do during this session? Discuss the nature and value of research-informed teaching. I broke it down from being what conceptualized as, sharing of my own research, to a whole array of differing approaches where we get students active in the creation of knowledge and we use the latest pedagogical techniques. I gave you a basic structure of how we can use these. I rendered down those models to those very simple 2x2 4-box matrix, which is a way in which you can prime yourself to remind you exactly how you can include research-informed teaching in the development of your teaching. And finally, we have this opportunity to try and practice live research-informed teaching. Now, that will form the Zoom room tomorrow, and those of you who are able to make it, we can discuss it there. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's more difficult to do this online than when we're live, we can bounce questions backwards and forwards, but that should have got the main key information across to you. And if you have any questions, please do email me. Thank you very much indeed.